Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into my next team preview video. Today we are doing the Arizona Cardinals. Thank you for tuning into this video. If you watched my previous videos, I really appreciate the support. If this is your first time watching one of my team preview videos, what you can expect in today's video, I'm gonna go over Cliff Kingsbury, my thoughts on him as a coach. I'm gonna take a look at the team's remaining cap space, see if they can make any moves prior to the season. Take a look at guys that have been on their teams over the last few years and that are entering a contract year. Then I give an offensive preview, a defensive preview. Then at the end of the episode, I give you my overall feelings on this team as we head into the season. And then when I am going over like the offense specifically, I do kind of give it a fantasy football perspective. You know, guys I want to try to draft this year, maybe guys I'm trying to avoid, stuff like that. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this then. Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury is entering his third year as a head coach, so this is a big year for Cliff Kingsbury. People that have watched my previous videos know that I talk up that I believe that head coaches, first-time NFL head coaches, should be given at least 3 seasons. To prove their worth as a NFL head coach. Usually by year 3, you want the head coach to implement his scheme, get the players that fit his scheme, build the culture the right way underneath that he views it, and that by then there should at least be, depending on like what type of roster he took control of, by then there should at least be a shift towards a winning program. Even if it's just like a barely over 500, but hey, we looked a lot better than last year. This is when you want to start seeing more wins. This is when you want to see more production, better success on the field. And I think this is kind of a prove it year, it feels like, for Cliff Kingsbury. I feel like this is a year that he needs to put together a winning season and show that he is worth the job. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe this is something they've tried to maybe find another guy to lead Kyler Murray. But I am a big believer in Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's got one heck of an offensive mind. And I'm very excited to see what his offense looks like this year, because I'm gonna talk about it here soon. But man, with Kyler Murray and all those wide receivers they have in that room, I think it's going to be a very fun offense to watch in Arizona. Now let's just go ahead and take a look at the remaining cap space. They're sitting around $11 million in cap space. So if they wanted to, they can maybe go acquire some more people, maybe to add some depth in that offensive line room. Maybe go add some depth in the cornerback room. And some other areas in the roster, maybe make a trade or anything like that, or they can maybe use some of that money to maybe give somebody a pay raise, a contract extension. And speaking of that, notable players entering a contract year. Obviously, there was a lot of talk with Chandler Jones this offseason. He supposedly requested a trade. I know he's kind of disputed that since then, but it will be interesting because obviously he's entering the last year of his contract. He probably wants a pay raise. Maybe he wants to finish his career out there in Arizona. But he's coming off that injury from last year, so I can understand the hesitation from the Cardinals wanting to give him an extension. But he's definitely the one player that, out of these 4 players that you see listed, that I could see Arizona trying to work something out prior to the season starting this year. And then Christian Kirk, you know, he's been solid, I guess, for them ever since he got taken in the second round. But you got to look, the writing's basically on the wall for Christian Kirk at this point. You know, they signed AJ Green. Not that that's like a huge, I'll talk about AJ here in a second, but it's not like it's a huge impact on Christian Kirk because AJ's up there in age. It's only a 1-year deal, but it's kind of telling that they were trying to actively bring in wide receivers to this team. So they brought in AJ Green, they drafted Rondale Moore. So I just don't see a future for Christian Kirk on this roster. So I definitely see him not getting any type of extension prior to the season. And I mean, if they feel comfortable with a lot of these wide receivers that are already on the team, that's a name to watch as we get down to the cut down date. Maybe a team that needs a wide receiver could reach out to the Cardinals about trading for Kirk and renting him out for this year on his final year of his rookie contract. So that's something to watch as we go forward. And then Chase Edmonds, you know, he's slotted in to be their starting running back this year, but we never really seen a full season of him being a lead dog. He's had some injuries in his past, so I don't see them giving him any type of money. I think this is his year where he's got to prove himself, and then when they get to the end of the year, maybe they can revisit it and see if they want to keep him in their plans for the future. And then Max Williams, definitely don't see that happening. He's an all right tight end. He's solid, but he's technically their starting tight end, so I got to put him up there for notable contract players. But I think this offense doesn't really have a big focus point on the tight end position. So I think they're kind of all right with just finding whoever they can slide into the tight end position. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I think it's just like maybe they work out with something with Chandler Jones, and then other than that, that 11 million cap space, maybe they can go acquire some people, get some depth in some areas that I think they could use it at. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get into this offensive preview. You're seeing these projected starters from Devin Jackson. This is actually his first time his projected starters have shown up in my video. You can give Devin a follow at @reald_Jackson on Twitter, and I highly suggest it. Devin is basically an upcoming star in this industry. I've kind of gotten to know him over these last 6 months, following him with him and then working with him on the Prospect Encyclopedia. He's one of the hardest workers you can work with, so I think he's got a bright future. Give him a follow. He pumps out content like crazy. So shout out to Devin on that and for giving me the projected starters on this. And then also the projected starters, I think I forgot to mention, pulled from the Prospect Encyclopedia. Some of you guys know what that is. It came out last year. It's a product I've been part of the last 2 years. A little slight delay on the release this year. It should be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. I'll let you guys know when I have more details. If you see a star next to any of these players' name, they're inside the Prospect Encyclopedia. To make the Cardinals top 22 player list, those players have to be from the last 3 NFL draft classes and have to have less than 12 career regular season starts. But yeah, let's take a look at this offense and start breaking it down. You look at the quarterback position, Kyler Murray is one of the most electrifying quarterbacks to ever come out of college in terms of his arm and feet. I talk about his feet all the time. When you watch him play, I swear he takes like 15 steps and 2 yards. I don't know why his agent has not got any type of partnership or sponsorship deal with like a Fitbit that, as far as tracking your steps. I just want to know how many steps he takes in a game day. Can we please get that done? But yeah, he's got a heck of an arm. He's so fast when he's on the field, and he's entering his 3rd season, and I think he's set to he's kind of already a star, but I think he's set to kind of blow up and become a superstar if he can put together one heck of a season this year. Now, let's take a look at his stats since 2018. Now, obviously, his numbers are kind of a little skewed because I collect the stats from a cumulative of the last 3 NFL seasons. He's only played 2, so that's why you're not really seeing any passing stats for Kyler on this list. But like I just talked about, he's very effective with his legs. Take a look at him among all quarterbacks since 2018. He's got the 2nd most rushing yards per game. He averages 42.6. He's tied for the 2nd most rushing yards per attempt. He's got the 4th most rushing yards among quarterbacks. He's tied for the 4th most rushing touchdowns. And in terms of fantasy football among quarterbacks, he's got the 6th most fantasy football points per game. So if we take a look at the fantasy football aspect, Kyler to me is a plug and play guy. He's a guy that you can draft and you put him in your quarterback position, and you don't have to think about replacing him until the bye week comes up. I love quarterbacks like that. I hate picking, streaming or going back and forth between 2 quarterbacks on my roster. I like a guy like Kyler Murray. I know I can plug in and just not even think about it. As you just saw, he's got a very high floor in fantasy because of his rushing ability. And I think you're going to see him actually even put more on a performance with his arm this year. I think they kind of improved the offensive line in the offseason with the acquisition of Rodney Hudson, because their line has forced him to kind of like tuck and run, extend plays with his legs right away after the snap. If they can give him a little bit more time this year, I think I can see him settling more in the pocket and picking apart defenses. But he definitely will still use his legs to his advantage to extend plays and get first downs with his legs. So I have a high expectation for a huge year out of Kyler Murray. He's definitely one of those, I definitely think he's a candidate to end up holding the MVP. this year. I'm gonna move on to the running back position. Chase Edmonds, I just talked him up. He's been basically their kind of backup this year, kind of a, I want to call him a change of pace, but just more of like a, he'd give a guy a breather. Maybe he'll get a drive here and there throughout the games. There was been a couple games over the last couple of years whenever maybe Kenyon Drake or some player would, I forgot who was the lead running back a couple of years ago before Drake. If one of those guys go down, he's been able to fill in. I know there was like a 2 week span. I know one game he like balled out. I want to say against the Niners, maybe. If I remember this right, he had like 100 yards and like 3 touchdowns or something like that. So he's been proven to, if he's ever leads the team in touches, he can be very effective. I definitely like his appeal in terms of fantasy. I view him more as a flex guy right now, more of a bench ad, because you want to see how he will perform and if he will get not only like a steady role, but like a significant amount of touches per game, because this will be a pass happy offense. Now he's a good receiving back as well, so he'll be a part of that. So I definitely understand if you want to take a chance on him. And then my other concern with Edmonds is the other guy in the running back room who they signed from the Steelers, which is James Conner. I have my concerns where maybe Edmonds will do all the work in between the 20s. And then when they get closer to the red zone, James Conner is going to come in because he's a bigger back. He can punch the ball. So I have my worries with Edmonds, punch the ball in the end zone. So that's where I have my worries. Is I don't know if like Edmonds is going to get the amount. I can see it be very annoying where he's going to get you those points, but then he doesn't get the touchdowns. That's where I could see kind of being an annoying owner of Edmonds in fantasy. But other than that, he's a good football player. He's going to fill his role nice on this team. And speaking of James Conner, I also kind of wonder if James Conner is actually the running back to own in fantasy football. Now, the biggest thing with James Conner is he has his injury history. He's typically going to probably miss some games, and he probably may miss some games this year. But because of that, he's going in later rounds. I want to say he's maybe going in like the 11th to 13th round in fantasy football drafts, and I think he's worth that as of right now. If you draft somebody guy around now, he's going to be on your bench. It's not like you're going to be depending on James Conner if you draft him this year. But if you do draft him, he's kind of got the upside where if Edmonds doesn't seize the opportunity to be the lead back, maybe they put James Conner in there and he can be the guy. And if he's in there, you might as well play him because whenever he is on the field, he has been pretty productive. So since 2018, James Conner is actually one of 9 running backs that have averaged 50 plus rushing yards per game and 25 plus receiving yards per game. Among running backs, he's got the 8th most receiving yards per game. And among all football players, he's tied for the 10th most rushing touchdowns. So I think he's got the upside where if Edmonds fails to deliver, he can fill in and end up being the starting guy and getting most of the touches out of the backfield. And then I think he's pretty much has got it secured to be the goal line back for Arizona this year. Because I forgot who mentioned it, but Chase Edmonds I think has maybe 1 or 2 carries inside the 5-yard line. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards Conner over Edmonds, because Edmonds kind of, if I remember right, he has a higher ADP than Edmonds. So either way, I think each Edmonds and Conner, I think I like how their skill sets complement each other. They might both be annoying to own in fantasy, but in terms of football, I think they're going to really benefit this Cardinals offense. But yeah, let's keep it moving to the wide receivers. Obviously, this is a very deep room in Arizona. They got the stud DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in AJ Green now. Well, it sounds like AJ Green is having a solid camp. I hope he is. I've always been an AJ Green stan. It's been so disappointing to see him over the last few years deal with his injuries. And I hope maybe a change of scenery can help him have a late career resurgence. And it sounds like that may be happening, at least in camp. We got to see that translate on the field. We got to see if he can stay healthy. But I'm excited to see if he is even 75% of himself of the pass, and AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins on the field. Because then you can line up whoever you want in the slot. Sometimes they go 4 wide receiver sets. So whether it's an Andy Isabella, a Christian Kirk, or a Rondale Moore, they're going to be very creative with this offense, and I'm excited to see how they utilize all of them. And then they got Andy Isabella, who could be a field stretcher, a burner. And he is entering year 3, by the way, guys. Now, I'm not drafting Andy Isabella in like a redraft league that's like 10 or 12 teams. But if you get to that 14 to 16 team league, I may take a chance on him on my bench, as if he has that year 3 boom. But I kind of have low expectations on that just because there's so many guys and so many mouths to feed in the wide receiver room. And they got Christian Kirk, like I already talked about him. He's been very solid, a very good route runner. The guy I'm really excited about to see how they use is Rondale Moore. I was very high on him coming into this past draft class. I think he's electrifying when he's on the field. He can be a playmaker for this offense, and they can utilize him inside the slot. They can put him in the backfield. He can be like a gadget type of weapon for them this year. Now, if we're going to look at this in terms of fantasy, I'm gonna go from the bottom guys up to DeAndre Hopkins because I have a lot of stats on DeAndre. Rondale Moore, watch his role. I wouldn't draft him, but watch his role at the beginning of the season and seeing if he's worth drafting. Christian Kirk, no, I would avoid that. Same thing like I just talked about Andy Isabella. Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella, those are guys you draft in deeper leagues. Same thing with AJ Green. I would watch it at the beginning of the season, see if I could add him, because there's just my biggest problem with all these guys outside of DeAndre Hopkins is I think all those guys are going to share about around the same amount of snaps in the game, and I think their target load is going to be very volatile and it's going to be very inconsistent. But the one guy to own is DeAndre Hopkins. He's been absolutely, you could make an argument over the last 3 seasons, he's been the best wide receiver over that time period. There's some other guys like Devontae Adams and some other players that you can make the argument for, but let's take a look at DeAndre Hopkins since 2018. Since 2018, DeAndre Hopkins is one of 8 players that have a season of 80 plus receptions, 1,000 plus yards, and 10 plus touchdowns. He's actually currently on the 4th longest active streak of having at least 1 reception in a game. And then all these stats are since 2018 among all wide receivers, outside the scrimmage yard one, that's among all players. He's got the most receptions. He's got the most receiving yards. He's got the 4th most receiving yards per game. He's got the 5th most fantasy football points per game. And he's got the 6th most receiving touchdowns. And he's got the 6th most scrimmage yards. So absolute stud. You don't have to think twice if you're going to draft DeAndre Hopkins. You know what you're going to get. He's going to get all the targets out of this room, and he's going to be very consistent for you and can put up some great weeks for you throughout the year. Now, I already kind of talked about Max Williams. He's kind of just an all-right tight end. They're going to do more, 3-4 wide receiver sets, but he could take advantage of all those guys around him and have some good games here and there. But he's just not he's not worth it in fantasy because he's going to have games where maybe he gets a nice little workload because everybody's opening things up around him, but then the next game he's going to have like 1 or 2 catches for like 15 yards. So yeah, definitely avoid that. And then I already kind of talked up the offensive line, and not like talked them up, but like talked about them. It should be a much improved unit. It's a unit full of veterans, which I kind of like because they have the NFL experience. They can lean on each other, and sometimes older guys just, they gel together. They want to be dogs together. And I can see that happening. They got DJ Humphries and Kelvin Beachum. It's kind of like a lower end bookend tackle situation, but both have plenty of experience in the NFL. Same thing with Justin Pugh. And then Rodney Hudson should be a significant upgrade at the center position. So the interior of their offensive line should be a lot better this year. Just like pretty much any NFL team, though, you obviously have concerns with the depth of the O-line room, if anything were to happen. But I kind of said this like, a year or 2 ago. My biggest concern with the Cardinals or with Kyler Murray was like their offensive line. I thought he was going to be, not have enough time to throw. But it doesn't matter. That guy is so quick with his feet. He can, if he needs to create space to get the throw, he can do that. But even with a slightly improved line, I think that's going to help his passing attack this year. So overall, this offense, it has the makings of a top 10 offense. They could get very creative with all the wide receivers that they have in the room. I think they got 2 running backs that complement each other well, and this should be a very exciting offense to watch on Sundays. But yeah, let's just keep it moving to their defense. And Again, these are the projected starters from Devin Jackson. Do give him a follow at @RealD_Jackson on Twitter, so you can read all his content that he does pump out. And this defense, I'll go ahead and say this. I definitely, when I was started studying this last night, I definitely thought I was going to be a lot lower on the defense, but I came out a little bit higher than I expected. Not super high on the defense, but just a little bit higher. I thought they were going to be a lot worse than when I was kind of thinking how this was all going to work out. Where do I want to start here? You know what I want to start with is Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt. Obviously, like, let's just see if Chandler Jones is still on the team at the end of the month. I think he's going to be there. I think they're going to make it work because I like the idea of J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones working on that defensive front and creating pressure together. Let's look at their stats, both of those guys' stats since 2018. J.J. Watt since 2018, he's tied for the fourth most forced fumbles. He's tied for the 7th most tackles for a loss, and he's got the 9th most quarterback hits. Then you look at Chandler Jones, he's got the 3rd most forced fumbles, so at 11. So you got 3rd and 4th most forced fumbles. Those guys could create turnovers on their own, and that's just 2 of the players they have on the defense. And then Chandler Jones, even though he was hurt for a majority of last year, I think maybe in the whole season, I don't really remember that when he went out last year. He has the 6th most sacks since 2018. So you're talking about two of the better defensive linemen, defensive front guys up at the front for the past decade to play the game are together, and I think they're going to be able to wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks. And then you look at the rest of their defense. I like Like Futu is a guy I liked in his last year's draft class. He can fill up that middle with his big body. Jordan Phillips is a solid defensive front. So the interior of the front with Watt, Futu, and Phillips is very solid. You got Chandler Jones coming off the edge, and think about it. You could have Chandler Jones and JJ coming off at one side, and then you could have Marcus Golden coming off the other side. Marcus Golden is a very solid player in this league. Here's a stat on him. He's actually one of 7 players that have a season of 67 plus tackles, 13 plus tackles for a loss, 16 plus quarterback hits, and 9 plus sacks since 2018. So they have 3 guys that can really get after the quarterback. So I like their defensive front. I like their ability where they can get creative to get the pressure. Now, this isn't really a high concern, but this could maybe be, it could, I don't know, give them pains at time, is they are counting on 2 young guys to run the middle of the defense. That's Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins. Everybody knows that I was a huge fan of Isaiah Simmons, and I still am. I thought he finally got comfortable at the end of the year, and both these players are very athletic, so they're sideline to sideline players. And if that defensive front is taking up all the the eyes from the offensive line, they're going to be able to flow all over the field, make tackles, make plays. So I like that. I really like it. But what I'm getting at is they're younger guys. So what is their processing skills at this point of their career? So they maybe have some mental lapses in reading plays. But I think as they develop, as the season goes along, as they gain those starts, as they gain the experience, they're going to get really strong in that defensive front 7. With Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins, and both those guys, you can use them creatively, and you can even use some of those guys in the pass rush to get after the quarterback if you wanted to. So I really like what they got up at the defensive front 7 in Arizona. And then you look at their back end of the defense. It can be very solid. Looks like the cornerbacks, Malcolm Butler. He's coming over from Tennessee. Now, Malcolm's not like a world-beating quarterback, but he's coming off one of his best seasons in his career. Malcolm Butler since 2018 is one of 10 players that have a season of 75 plus tackles, 12 plus pass deflections, and 3 plus interceptions. So he's very strong. I was a big believer in Byron Murphy. He was a top 5 cornerback. I can't remember that class. He was either cornerback 1 or 2 for me. But I'm a big fan of his game. I think he's going to have I believe his 3rd season, right? He's going to have a good year. I like the combination of him and Byron Murphy. Now, Robert Alford, that's where I get my concerns in that cornerback room. He didn't play at all last year because of an injury. He's a very solid cornerback when he's on the field, but you just got to hope that he's going to be able to be able to stay healthy, because that's the biggest concern with the secondary is the lack of depth they have in there. It's a lot of younger guys, a lot of inexperience behind them, so that's where I do get my concerns. So that opposite side of Malcolm, I think Malcolm Butler's solid himself, but I don't know. I think they need to kind of figure that situation out. If Robert's not the guy, who can fill in for him? I know they got other veterans. I didn't put them on the notable backups. We'll see if they even make the team, like a guy like Darquez Denard or Daryl Worley and stuff like that. So, we'll see how that situation plays out in Arizona. But overall, it's a solid cornerback group. And then you really like their safety group. They got Jalen Thompson, who's solid. They also got Deontay Thompson, who I was a big fan of in his draft class. Just an injury, his knee problem has kind of held him back from his development. And the biggest stud is Budda Baker. That he's actually got the third most solo tackles since 2018 at 272. So overall, this defense, I think it's a very solid defense. I don't think it's a top 10 defense in terms of like production and holding defenses down, because I do think there are going to be moments where quarterbacks can pick them apart through the air if they're not getting the pressure they need to. But I really like their ability to be creative on passing situations, on third and long situations, where they can get J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones, and Marcus Golden getting after the quarterback and getting those quarterback hits, those pressures, and those sacks to end drives. So it's definitely going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot better than what this unit was last year. And then, that's my preview. We got the offensive. Before I finish the defensive preview, I always talk about, for those who don't know, I'm a huge fan of streaming defenses every week. So when I am in redraft leagues, when I draft my defense for week 1. The Cardinals got the Titans week 1. The Titans got Julio, A.J. Brown. They've been one of the better offenses in the league over the last couple of years. So I would probably avoid it for now. But I will say this. If everything's taken and I'm like, man, who do I want? Maybe I consider it because of the pass rushing ability to get sacks from this Cardinals team. Other than that, that's my preview. And then this team as a whole, the Cardinals. I'm buying in the hype this year. I did not buy into it last year. I brought up my concerns. I actually just posted this on Twitter before I recorded that, who's this year's team, the 2019 Browns or the 2020 Cardinals. I felt the Cardinals were a little year, I felt like everybody was a year too early on this Cardinals team as far as being a playoff team. But this is the time where you can get really high on the Arizona Cardinals. I think I have high expectations for them to have a top 10 offense. I think their defense is going to be very solid. I love the ability that they can get creative with how they can attack the opposing quarterback in passing situations. And I think this is a team that, they can win in shootouts because of their ability to push the ball through the air with Kyler Murray. And they have the ability to, if they need to pull the ears back and get after the quarterback, they can do that with Chandler Jones, Marcus Golden, and J.J. Watt. So the biggest concern with me, though, if they're going to make the playoffs, is if they're going to survive the NFC West. The NFC West is basically a gauntlet this year. I said that on my San Francisco 49ers preview. I think I've said this in chats before, but I think I could see anywhere between up to 2 to 3 teams from the NFC West making it into the playoffs. So the Cardinals, to me, if the ball bounces their way, I think they're like if Cliff Kingsbury can deliver on the coach he's supposed to be. This is a team that can finish like 9-8 up until like 11-6. Depending on how the rest of the division plays, that 11-6 record might win the NFC West. Now, if Cliff Kingsbury fails to deliver this year, you might be seeing a 8-9, 7-10, a 6-11 team, and they're actually moving on from him and seeing if they can find somebody else to lead Kyler Murray and this Cardinals team. So, with that being said, though, I think they're going to push for the playoffs. I think they have a chance to win this division, and I think they're going to be a very exciting team to watch in 2021. I can't wait to see this. I think Kyler Murray could potentially win an MVP this year. I'm buying the hype on the Cardinals this year. Let's see how it turns out. But yeah, guys, thank you for tuning in my video. That is it for today. Again, thank you for watching this video. If you watched my previous videos, I do appreciate that. If you did enjoy this one today, please hit that like button. If you're watching this video and you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. It is my goal to get to 100 subscribers by the time we get to that Bucks and Cowboys kickoff game in September. Go tell a friend to subscribe, go tell a friend to go check out this video. And then my next video will be the Las Vegas Raiders. I will be doing that at some point tomorrow. And I appreciate the support from everybody. I'll talk to you when I do the Raiders video. Peace out.